The first thing that would destroy you on Hadrian's Wall would not be battle. It would not be a charging enemy from the northern tribes or the clash of iron in the darkness. It would be the cold, a deep, endless cold that settled into your bones and refused to leave. Britannia was nothing like the warm lands many Roman soldiers came from. The skies were gray for weeks at a time. Rain fell without warning, and icy winds swept across the frontier day and night. A legionnaire could wake soaked from rain, march through mud for hours, and still be ordered to stand guard through the freezing night without complaint. The wall itself stretched across the northern frontier of Roman Britain like a massive scar carved into the land. Built under Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century, it marked the edge of Rome's control. Beyond it lay wild territory inhabited by fierce tribal warriors Rome could never completely conquer. Every stone of that wall represented fear, tension, a constant threat of attack. Soldiers stationed there knew they were living at the very edge of the civilized world. One step beyond the frontier could mean death in the forests, swamps, or hills where enemies knew the land far better than any Roman ever could. Daily life was filled with exhausting labor. Most people imagine Roman soldiers spending their time training for glorious battles, but much of their existence involved endless physical work. Legionnaires repaired damaged sections of the wall, dug defensive trenches, carried heavy timber, and built roads through unforgiving terrain. Their armor alone weighed heavily on their shoulders, especially after hours of marching in rain and mud. The work never truly stopped. Even after long patrols, soldiers were expected to maintain their weapons, clean their equipment, and prepare for the next command. The forts along Hadrian's Wall were crowded, damp, and uncomfortable. Hundreds of men slept packed together in small barracks with little warmth during the brutal winters. Fires provided only limited comfort against the freezing winds that slipped through cracks in the stone walls. The smell of sweat, wet leather, smoke, and unwashed bodies filled the air constantly. Disease spread easily in those harsh conditions. A single illness could move through a barracks quickly, weakening men already exhausted from labor and poor nutrition. Food was another struggle many would never endure today. Roman soldiers survived on simple rations that often became stale or spoiled in the harsh climate. Bread hardened quickly in the damp air, meat was heavily salted to prevent rot, and clean water was not always guaranteed. Supplies could arrive late during storms or difficult seasons, forcing soldiers to ration what little they had. Hunger became part of daily life. Yet despite exhaustion and poor meals, the army demanded that every man remain ready for combat at any moment. Sleep offered little relief. A legionnaire on Hadrian's Wall could never fully relax because danger was always close. Guards stood watch through the night, scanning the dark hills beyond the frontier for movement. Sometimes it was only the wind, sometimes it was something worse. Northern raiders often attacked without warning, striking isolated patrols or launching sudden assaults on forts. A soldier could be dragged from sleep by the sound of horns, screams, or the pounding of boots as commanders rushed men into formation. The psychological pressure was just as dangerous as the physical hardship. Many soldiers stationed on the wall were thousands of miles from their homes. Some came from Italy, North Africa, or distant provinces of the empire, and found themselves trapped in a cold land they barely understood. Letters from family could take months to arrive if they arrived at all. Years passed without seeing loved ones. Loneliness settled heavily over the forts, especially during long winters when darkness seemed endless and morale began to fade. The enemy beyond the wall added another layer of fear to everyday life. Roman soldiers often viewed the northern tribes as unpredictable and savage fighters. These warriors knew how to survive in the brutal environment and used the landscape to their advantage. They could disappear into forests, launch ambushes, and vanish before Roman forces could respond. Every patrol beyond the wall carried the possibility of never returning. Even experienced soldiers understood how quickly confidence could turn into panic once isolated in unfamiliar territory. Discipline inside the Roman army was unforgiving because commanders knew weakness could destroy the frontier. Soldiers who failed their duties faced severe punishment. Desertion, cowardice, or disobedience could lead to beatings or execution. Rome expected absolute loyalty and obedience from its legionnaires, regardless of exhaustion or fear. The army transformed ordinary men into hardened instruments of order through relentless training and harsh control. There was no room for comfort, hesitation, or personal weakness on Hadrian's wall. Over time, the wall changed men completely. The endless hardship hardened some soldiers into survivors capable of enduring conditions most people today could never imagine. Others slowly broke beneath the pressure. The freezing weather, constant labor, isolation, fear, and violence stripped away every illusion about glory and honor. Life on the frontier was not about heroic speeches or triumphant victories. It was about enduring another day in one of the harshest military postings in the Roman Empire. Discipline was the foundation of the Roman army, and without it, the empire would never have survived as long as it did. On Hadrian's wall, discipline was not simply a military rule. It was the difference between life and death. Every soldier understood that one careless mistake on the frontier could lead to disaster. A guard falling asleep during watch, a patrol failing to report movement beyond the wall, or a unit breaking formation during an attack could cost dozens of lives within moments. Rome knew fear alone could not hold the frontier together, so it built an army where obedience became stronger than fear itself. From the moment a man entered the Roman military, his individuality began to disappear. Recruits were trained to think and act as part of a machine larger than themselves. They marched in formation for endless hours, carrying heavy packs across rough terrain until their bodies adapted to pain and exhaustion. Commands had to be followed instantly without hesitation. Soldiers repeated drills over and over again until movement became instinct. Swinging a sword, raising a shield, forming defensive lines, and responding to horns or shouted orders all became automatic reactions burned into the mind through repetition. Training on Hadrian's wall was especially brutal because the environment itself constantly tested the soldiers. Rain soaked their clothing during exercises, mud slowed their movements, and freezing winds weakened their grip on weapons. Yet the officers demanded perfection regardless of the conditions. Roman commanders believed discipline had to remain stronger than discomfort. A soldier who could maintain formation in freezing rain and exhaustion was far more dangerous than a stronger fighter who panicked under pressure. Rome valued control above all else because controlled soldiers could hold the line even when fear spread through the battlefield. Punishment inside the Roman army was severe and often terrifying. Discipline was enforced through fear as much as loyalty. A legionnaire who ignored orders, abandoned his post, or showed cowardice could face brutal consequences. Flogging was common for lesser offenses, and executions were carried out publicly to warn others what failure looked like. In extreme cases, entire units could be punished together if commanders believed discipline had collapsed. Rome understood that harsh punishment created an army where men feared dishonor and failure almost as much as death itself. The structure of the Roman military also strengthened discipline. Every soldier knew his exact role inside the formation. Centurions, the hardened officers who led smaller units, enforced order constantly. These men were respected and feared because they fought beside their soldiers while demanding absolute obedience. Centurions inspected equipment, monitored behavior, and punished weakness immediately. Their presence ensured discipline never disappeared even during exhausting conditions on the frontier. Many legionnaires feared disappointing their centurion more than facing enemy warriors beyond the wall. On Hadrian's wall, discipline extended far beyond combat. Even daily routines followed strict order. Soldiers woke at designated hours, trained according to schedule, repaired defenses, cleaned weapons, and performed guard duties with precision. Meals, patrols, and work assignments all operated under military structure. Rome believed idle soldiers became weak soldiers. Keeping men constantly occupied reduced the chances of disorder, laziness, or rebellion. The harsh rhythm of military life shaped every hour of a legionnaire's existence until obedience became part of his identity. Discipline also controlled fear during battle. Northern tribal warriors often attacked with terrifying speed and aggression, screaming as they charged Roman positions. Many armies throughout history would break under such pressure, but Roman legionnaires were trained to remain steady. Shields locked together, formations tightened, and commands echoed through the ranks even in chaos. A single disciplined formation could withstand enemies who fought with greater fury but lacked organization. Rome understood that panic spread quickly in combat. so soldiers were conditioned to trust the formation more than their individual instincts. The harsh conditions on Hadrian's Wall constantly tempted soldiers to give in to despair. Endless rain, exhaustion, homesickness, and isolation wore down even experienced legionnaires. Yet discipline forced men to continue despite mental and physical suffering. A soldier still had to patrol the frontier even after sleepless nights. He still had to stand guard during storms and repair defenses with frozen hands. The Roman military depended on men who could obey orders even when every part of their body wanted to quit. Over time, this relentless structure transformed ordinary recruits into hardened veterans. Men who once feared pain learned to endure it silently. Soldiers who arrived at the frontier weak or uncertain slowly adapted to its demands because discipline left them no alternative. Rome created warriors capable of surviving conditions that would break most people. The army did not rely on inspiration or emotion to maintain strength. It relied on routine, punishment, training, and absolute control over the minds of its soldiers. For the legionnaires stationed on Hadrian's Wall, discipline became more than military duty. It shaped how they walked, fought, worked, and even thought. Every movement reflected the system Rome had built over centuries. In a land filled with danger, cold, and uncertainty, discipline gave the Roman army its greatest advantage. It allowed exhausted men to remain standing when weaker armies would collapse, and it turned the frontier into a place where survival depended not on comfort or courage alone, but on unwavering obedience to the machine of Rome. Isolation was one of the cruelest punishments a Roman legionnaire faced on Hadrian's Wall. Long before enemy warriors appeared beyond the frontier, the silence and distance from home had already begun breaking men from the inside. Many soldiers stationed there came from distant parts of the empire where the climate, language, and culture were completely different from the cold wilderness of northern Britain. Some had grown up beneath the warm sun of Italy or North Africa, only to find themselves trapped in a land of endless rain, gray skies, and bitter winds. The farther they stood from Rome, the more abandoned they often felt. For many legionnaires, joining the Roman army meant leaving home for decades. Once assigned to Hadrian's Wall, a soldier could spend years without seeing his family again. Travel across the empire was slow, dangerous, and expensive. A father might never meet the child born after his departure. Parents could die while their sons stood guard thousands of miles away with no way to return in time. Wives waited through years of uncertainty, never knowing whether their husbands were still alive beyond the northern frontier. The emotional distance grew heavier with every passing winter. Letters became one of the few remaining connections to home, yet even those offered little comfort. Messages traveled slowly across Roman roads and seas, often taking months to arrive. Some never arrived at all. A soldier might hold on to a faded letter for years, reading the same words repeatedly during lonely nights in the barracks. News from home could bring both comfort and pain. It reminded legionnaires of the lives they had left behind, but also reminding them how far away those lives truly were. The landscape itself deepened the feeling of isolation. Hadrian's Wall stood in one of the most remote regions of Roman Britain. Vast hills, dark forests, swamps, and empty stretches of land surrounded the fort. During storms, visibility vanished beneath heavy rain and fog, making the frontier feel even more cut off from the rest of the world. At night, the silence beyond the wall could become overwhelming. Soldiers stared into darkness, wondering what waited in the wilderness beyond the reach of Roman control. Life inside the forts offered little emotional relief. The barracks were crowded with exhausted men carrying their own fears and frustrations. Privacy barely existed. Every day followed the same exhausting cycle of work: patrols, guard duty, and training. Conversations often revolved around rumors of attacks, complaints about conditions, or memories of home. Over time, monotony became mentally exhausting. Days blended together until many soldiers lost track of seasons and years. The wall became less of a military assignment and more like a prison at the edge of the empire. Winter was especially brutal for morale. Cold, rain, and freezing winds trapped soldiers inside damp forts for long periods while darkness stretched endlessly across the frontier. Fires burned low, supplies grew limited, and sickness spread easily among exhausted men. The psychological pressure intensified during these months because the environment itself felt hostile. Some soldiers became withdrawn and silent. Others grew angry or reckless. Isolation amplified every emotion, turning loneliness into something heavy enough to crush a man's spirit. Fear also isolated legionnaires from one another. Even though soldiers lived closely together, many kept their deeper thoughts hidden because weakness could damage a man's reputation within the army. Roman military culture valued toughness and endurance, leaving little room for emotional vulnerability. A soldier suffering from fear, homesickness, or despair often carried those burdens alone. Many learned to bury their emotions beneath routine and discipline simply to survive daily life on the frontier. The constant threat of sudden violence added another layer to the mental strain. At any moment, horns could sound through the fort announcing raids or attacks beyond the wall. Soldiers never fully relaxed because danger always felt close. Even during quiet nights, men remained alert to strange noises in the darkness. The stress of living under constant tension slowly wore down the mind. Sleep became restless, and many soldiers lived in a state of permanent exhaustion caused by fear and uncertainty. Some legionnaires attempted to escape the crushing isolation by forming bonds with local communities near the forts. Traders, craftsmen, and families often settled around Roman military outposts, creating small settlements beside the wall. Soldiers sometimes found companionship there, building relationships despite official military restrictions. These connections offered brief moments of normal life in an otherwise harsh existence. Yet even these relationships carried uncertainty because military orders could transfer soldiers elsewhere at any time. Over the years, isolation transformed many men completely. Young recruits arriving with ambition and confidence often became hardened, distant figures shaped by loneliness and survival. The frontier stripped away illusions about glory and honor, replacing them with endurance and emotional toughness. For countless legionnaires, the hardest battle on Hadrian's wall was not against enemies beyond the frontier, but against the silent weight of separation, fear, and endless distance from everything they once called home. The struggles faced by Roman legionnaires on Hadrian's wall still feel familiar today because human hardship has never truly disappeared. The weapons have changed, the empires have faded, and the world has become more comfortable. Yet the battle against pressure, fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty remains part of human life. The Roman soldier standing guard in freezing rain was fighting a different kind of war, but the emotional weight he carried is something people still understand. Every generation faces moments that demand resilience, sacrifice, and the strength to continue when life becomes difficult. Modern life often hides discomfort behind convenience. Technology, entertainment, and comfort allow people to escape hardship quickly. But comfort can also weaken endurance. Roman legionnaires did not have the option to step away from suffering. When storms came, they endured them. When exhaustion overwhelmed them, they continued marching. Their survival depended on adapting to pain instead of avoiding it. This harsh reality shaped men who understood that strength was not built during easy moments, but during periods of struggle and pressure. The daily routines of Roman soldiers also reveal the importance of discipline in overcoming adversity. Legionnaires followed strict schedules regardless of weather, mood, or physical exhaustion. They trained constantly because preparation gave them confidence in dangerous situations. In modern life, many people struggle with consistency because motivation rises and falls quickly. The Roman military mindset teaches that discipline matters more than temporary emotion. Progress often comes from continuing the task even when energy, excitement, or comfort disappear. The environment on Hadrian's wall forced soldiers to confront fear every day. They knew raids, ambushes, and violence could erupt without warning. Yet they still climbed the watchtowers, patrolled the frontier, and stood guard through the night. Modern fears may not involve enemy warriors beyond a wall, but uncertainty still controls many lives. Fear of failure, rejection, loss, or hardship can paralyze people just as effectively as fear on an ancient battlefield. Roman legionnaires demonstrate that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to continue functioning despite it. Isolation was another challenge that connects the ancient world to the present. Many people today experience loneliness, even while surrounded by modern communication and crowded cities. Roman soldiers understood isolation in its rawest form. They spent years separated from loved ones while living in remote conditions far from home. Yet they continued performing their duties because survival required emotional endurance. Their experiences show that resilience often means carrying emotional burdens quietly while continuing to move forward. The physical hardships faced by the legionnaires also reveal how much the human mind influences survival. Roman soldiers marched through freezing rain, carried heavy equipment across rough terrain, and survived on limited food while maintaining military readiness. Their bodies suffered constantly, but mental toughness allowed them to endure conditions that seemed unbearable. Modern challenges may not involve ancient warfare, yet people still face situations requiring mental resilience. Illness, financial struggle, personal loss, and emotional stress all test a person's ability to endure discomfort without giving up. Roman military discipline also highlights the importance of responsibility toward others. A legionnaire's actions affected the safety of the entire unit. One careless mistake could place fellow soldiers in danger. This sense of shared duty created strong bonds between men who depended on one another for survival. Modern society often emphasizes individual success, but the Roman frontier reminds us that resilience becomes stronger when people support and protect each other during difficult times. Human beings endure hardship more effectively when they feel connected to something larger than themselves. The frontier experience also teaches that resilience develops slowly over time. Most recruits arriving at Hadrian's Wall were not immediately prepared for its brutality. Many struggled with fear, exhaustion, and homesickness during their early months, but repeated exposure to hardship gradually transformed them into hardened veterans capable of enduring conditions that once seemed impossible. Modern people often expect rapid success or immediate emotional recovery, yet the Roman experience shows that true resilience is built through repeated struggle and adaptation. Another lesson from the legionnaires is the danger of depending entirely on comfort. Roman soldiers survived because they learned to function without luxury, convenience, or certainty. Modern life often encourages constant comfort and distraction, making even small hardships feel overwhelming. The harsh existence on Hadrian's Wall demonstrates that people are capable of enduring far more than they realize when circumstances demand it. Human strength often remains hidden until difficult situations force it to emerge. The story of Hadrian's Wall continues to resonate because it reflects timeless truths about endurance and human nature. The Roman legionnaires were not superhuman warriors untouched by fear or pain. They were ordinary men pushed into extraordinary conditions where survival depended on discipline, mental strength, and perseverance. Their struggles reveal that resilience is not something people are simply born with. It is created through hardship, sacrifice, repetition, and the refusal to collapse when life becomes difficult.